Picture the Ural Mountains, not as a map coordinate, but as a physical entity, a spine of jagged stone separating Europe from Asia, rising out of the Russian tundra like the exposed vertebrae of a buried giant. In February, it is not a landscape. It is a weapon. The air is so cold it feels like inhaling glass. The wind does not blow. It scours. It erases. On the slope of a mountain, the indigenous Mansi people call Kholat, Syakhl, the dead mountain. There sits a tent. It is February 26, 1959. The tent is half collapsed, buried under weeks of snow, but look closer. The fabric hasn't been torn by the wind. It has been slashed, and it has been slashed from the inside. This is the first fact, and it is the most damning. 9 experienced hikers, mountaineers who knew the risks of the sub-zero wild better than they knew their own futures, woke up in the pitch black of night and decided that the freezing death waiting outside was preferable to whatever was inside that tent. They didn't unzip the door. They didn't have time. They took their knives and they cut their way out. They ran into the darkness, into minus 30 degrees Celsius weather, without boots, without coats, some in just their socks, some in nothing but their underwear. They ran for a mile down the slope, towards the tree line, and they never came back. Welcome to the Frequency Unsolved. This is the Dyatlov Pass Incident. To understand the horror of the end, we must understand the vitality of the beginning. They were not amateurs. They were the best of their generation, students and graduates of the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Young, strong Soviet youth in the prime of the atomic age. They were led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student with a reputation for intense focus and rigid discipline. He was the kind of man who calculated routes down to the meter. The group consisted of 8 men and 2 women. We have their cameras. We have their diaries. That is what makes this tragedy so intimate. We can see the days leading up to the end. The black and white photos show them smiling, hugging, playing mandolin. They look like friends on an adventure. There is Yuri Doroshenko, the sturdy athletic type. Zineda Kolmogorova, universally liked, putting on her heavy boots. Lyudmila Dubinina, the youngest woman, laughing at a joke. They are happy. They are documenting a journey that was supposed to be a grade 3 climb, the most difficult category at the time. Their goal was Mount Otorten, a name which, in the Mansi language, translates roughly to "don't go there." One hiker, Yuri Yudin, turned back early due to chronic joint pain. He hugged them goodbye. He turned around. He was the only one who would survive. He lived the rest of his life wondering why he was spared, or perhaps why he was left behind. The timeline is established through their journals. On February 1st, late in the afternoon, the group begins to climb the pass. The weather turns against them. A blizzard blinds them, pushing them off course, west, towards the top of Kholat Syakhl. Recognizing the error, Dyatlov makes a decision. Rather than losing altitude, to go down to the forested valley where they could find wood for a fire and shelter from the wind. He orders them to set up camp right there, on the exposed slope. Why? Maybe he wanted to practice a slope camp. Maybe he didn't want to lose the ground they had gained. We will never know. They pitch the large canvas tent. They eat a cold dinner of ham and crackers. They take off their wet boots. They settle in for sleep. And then the timeline stops. Weeks pass. Families in Sverdlovsk begin to worry. The telegram that was supposed to arrive by February 12th never comes. By February 20th, the panic sets in. A search party is assembled volunteer students, the military helicopters. On February 26th, a student volunteer named Mikhail Sherevin spots the tent. He approaches it with hope, shouting their names. But the mountain is silent. The tent is empty. He peers inside. He sees boots lined up neatly. He sees backpacks. He sees a plate with uneaten food. And he sees the slash marks. The search party follows the footprints. There are 8 or 9 sets of tracks. They are strange. Some are barefoot. Some show a single boot. They are walking, not running, down the slope. It appears calm, orderly, but terrifyingly exposed. The tracks lead down towards a large cedar tree at the edge of the forest, nearly a mile away. Under that cedar tree, the first 2 bodies are found, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko. They are stripped to their underwear. Their hands are burned. Beside them are the remains of a small fire. The branches of the cedar tree are broken up to 5 meters high, suggesting one of them had climbed it. Desperately, was he looking for the tent? Or was he looking at something else? Something approaching them. Between the cedar tree and the tent, 3 more bodies are found. Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Komagarova, Rustem Slobodin. They are scattered at intervals, face down in the snow. Their poses suggest they were trying to crawl back up the slope. Back to the tent. They died of hypothermia. Their bodies are frozen hard, preserved in the attitude of their final struggle. Dyatlov is clutching a birch branch. Zenaida has blood around her nose. But this was the explainable part. This was just the tragedy of the cold. The true nightmare lay waiting in the ravine. It took 2 months to find the rest. May 1959. The spring thaw revealed the final 4 hikers buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine further into the woods. Lyudmila Dubanina, Semyon Zolotaryov, Alexander Kolevatov, and Nikolai Thibeaux-Brignoles. When the medical examiner, Dr. Boris Vozrozdeny, performed the autopsies on these 4, the clinical tone of the reports shifts into something resembling disbelief. The first 5 hikers had died of hypothermia, but the 4 in the ravine, they had died of violence. Nikolai Thibeaux-Brignoles had a fractured skull. The bone was driven into the brain. It was an injury consistent with a high-velocity impact. Semyon Zolotaryov and Lyudmila Dubanina had crushed chests. Their ribs were broken, not just cracked, shattered. Dubanina had 10 broken ribs. Zolotaryov had 5. Dr. Vozrozdeny noted that the force required to cause such damage would be equal to a car crash or a shock wave. But here is the anomaly. Here is the detail that keeps investigators awake at night. There was no external bruising. If you hit a human chest with a hammer hard enough to shatter the ribs, the skin turns black and blue. The tissue turns to pulp. But the skin on these hikers was unbroken. The damage was entirely internal. It was as if they had been squeezed by a giant hydrostatic pressure. And then the most grotesque detail of all, Lyudmila Dubanina. When they found her, she was missing her eyes. She was missing her tongue. The muscle had been ripped out from the root. The floor of her mouth was gone. Some say it was scavenging animals. Small microbes in the stream water eating away at the soft tissue. That is the rational explanation. But the rest of the body was relatively intact. Why just the tongue? Why the eyes? There were other oddities. The clothes. The hikers were wearing each other's clothes. Zolotaryov was wearing Dubanina's coat and hat. Dubanina's foot was wrapped in a piece of Krivonishenko's wool pants. It paints a picture of frantic desperation. As one friend died, the survivors stripped the body to try and stay warm. A macabre recycling of life to delay the inevitable. And the skin, witnesses at the funerals claimed the bodies had a deep brick red, almost orange discoloration. They looked like they had been tanned. Their hair had turned completely gray. We have the bodies. We have the timeline. Now we have the question. What happened? Let's look at the theories. The most prevalent theory today, supported by modern computer modeling, is the slab avalanche. The idea is that by cutting into the slope to pitch their tent, the group destabilized a slab of snow. In the middle of the night, a heavy block of ice and snow slid down, crushing the tent. This explains the rib injuries, the weight of the snow pressing them into the floor. It explains the slashing. They had to cut their way out of the suffocating weight. It explains the lack of boots. They fled in panic, fearing a second slide. It is clean. It is scientific. But it is unsatisfying. The slope was incredibly gentle only, about 23 degrees. Avalanches are rare on such shallow angles. And if an avalanche crushed them, why were the footprints leading away from the tent so calm? Why did the tent remain largely visible when the searchers found it? And how does snow rip out a tongue? Then there is the infrasound theory. The wind, the shape of the Kholat Syakhl peak is unique. When high winds hit the topography just right, it can create a phenomenon called the Kármán vortex street. This generates infrasound sound waves at a frequency below human hearing. You can't hear it, but you can feel it. It vibrates the eyeballs. It causes nausea. It induces irrational, primal terror. Did the mountain itself scream at them? Did the vibrations drive them mad, making them feel a presence that wasn't there, forcing them to flee into the night to escape the sound in their heads? Or do we look to the sky? Another group of hikers, camping 50 kilometers south of the Dyatlov group on that same night, reported seeing strange, glowing orange spheres floating in the sky toward Kholat Syakhl. The lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, was obsessed with these lights. He collected reports from meteorology officials and the military confirming the sightings. When the clothes of the hikers were tested with a Geiger counter, they clicked. There was radiation found on the garments of the group found in the ravine. Not high levels, but present. Beta radiation. Was this a military test? A Soviet weapon gone wrong? Parachute mines? A rocket failure? The injuries, the crushed chests, the internal damage are consistent with the shock wave of an explosion. If a concussion bomb went off above the ravine, it would explain the trauma without the impact marks. It would explain the orange skin radiation burns or chemical exposure. It would explain why the Soviet government was so eager to wrap this up. Because they did wrap it up quickly. The investigation was closed in May 1959. The area was declared off-limits to skiers and hikers for 3 years. The files were sent to a secret archive. The official conclusion of the Soviet criminal investigation is a masterpiece of bureaucratic obfuscation. It does not name a murder. It does not name a natural disaster. It simply states that the cause of death was an unknown compelling force. Think about that phrase. Unknown compelling force. It implies something that could not be resisted. Something that stripped the will from 9 strong, capable people and marched them to their deaths. 70 years later, the snow still falls on Kholat, Syakhl. The cedar tree still stands, though it has aged. The pass is now named after the leader of the lost group, Dyatlov Pass. Tourists go there now. They take selfies. They speculate. But stand there for a moment in your mind. Turn off the lights in your room. Imagine the absolute silence of a mountain night, the temperature dropping, the wind picking up. You are warm in your sleeping bag. You are safe. And then something happens. Something so terrifying, so immediate, that you take the knife by your side and you slash the wall of your sanctuary. You step out into the void. You leave your shoes. You leave your life. And you walk down into the dark toward the tree line where the compelling force is waiting. The file remains closed. The force remains unknown. The wind still screams, but it tells no tales. But this is just one story from the shadows. If you want to dive deeper into the unexplained, I have another file waiting for you on the screen right now. It digs into a mystery that is even more disturbing than the one you just heard. Click it now and let's continue the investigation. Until then, check your locks and keep the lights on.